We're going to return to the My Kitchen with Resources working file to look at some of the issues, or potential issues, should we say, when assigning resources. Now, these potential issues are really only a problem with work resources. With cost and material resources, this problem does not arise because they're not about dealing with time, they're about dealing with number of units. So if we need to add some material or cost resources, we simply choose our task. Let's go with attach new unit fixings, and we want some of our materials. Well, we need some nails. You see that it defaults to 1, whatever the unit is. Well, that's 1 box. If I need 10 boxes, I simply type 10 in there. I don't need to type the word box. When I then move down to the next line, Microsoft Project puts 10 box. I also need some screws. Again, they're supplied in boxes. I need 5 of those. And I need a miscellaneous cost, which will cover a little bit of glue that I've got to buy. And in this particular case, I need to manually put the cost value in of 25. Notice these two costs have not been calculated as yet. If I say OK and then come back into the task information, see the cost values have been calculated, which are simple, straightforward mathematics. 10 boxes times the unit cost, 5 boxes times the unit cost. I get 70, I get 50, and then the manual miscellaneous cost type of 25. Those material resources also appear on the Gantt chart. So I can see nails, 10 box, screws, 5 box, miscellaneous, $25. So as well as any work resources we assign, any material resources and cost type resources also appear on the Gantt chart. So adding materials and cost, that is straightforward, not a problem. No issues are going to arise. Let's have a look at the issues that can arise with work resources. Let's pick on pull up old carpets and bring in the split. Now the reason I want the split is because I can see what's going to happen. So if you keep an eye on the duration, 0.75 of a day to carry out pulling up the old carpets. I'm going to go ahead and do that myself. So a project manager. If it's a whole project manager, I don't need to put any units in. If it's going to be a part or more than one, then I do. Well, it's not. It's going to be one project manager. When I say OK, the calculations are carried out. Now, the calculations are straightforward. I've got one unit working at 0.75 of a day is 6 hours work. If I want to see what that 6 hours is going to cost me, I can have a look in the task information, and it's going to cost 86.54, or I can change this bottom view by right-clicking and choosing cost, and I'll see that it's costing me 86.54. It's the same data, it's just displayed in a different place. Let's go back to resources and predecessors. So that's not the problem. We assign a work resource, it's 6 hours work, 6 hours times the hourly rate, or in our case, the project manager is on a yearly rate, so it's calculated down, and it's costing me $86 for the project manager to pull up the old carpets. If I then say, actually, he's not going to be able to manage it on his own, the joiner is going to help. So I come and add the joiner. Now we have a slight issue here. I've already assigned a resource. So if I now add the joiner, does Microsoft Project think, oh, that's good. There's 2 people doing it now. I'll be able to do it in half the time. So it'll be 3 hours work for 2 people, which is 6 hours altogether. Or does it think, actually, it's still going to take 3/4 of a day. We've just got 2 people doing the same job because you needed those 2 people in the first place. So you sort of have to think around and about. Well, let's see what it does by default. So I'm adding a joiner. I then say OK, and we see that it sticks at 3/4 of a day, and 2 people are now working, so my cost has gone up. So I go right click and cost, costing me $86.54 for the project manager and $150 for the joiner. If, however, what I wanted to happen is the job to get done quicker because I assigned another person, then let's remove the joiner. OK. And change here the fixed units. What I want to change this to is fixed work. So I can fix any proportion of the 3 parts of the equation effectively. The duration, the units, and the works. The works, the amount of hours required to get the job done. The units is the amount of resources assigned to do that job, and the duration is how long the job is going to take. If I fix the work, and then OK, the work for this task is now going to be fixed at 6 hours. If I add a joiner in, come and help us out, OK, we see that the work remains fixed at 6 hours, but because I've now added another person, that work is divided equally between them. And the duration changed because they're doing 3 hours each, and that 3 hours each is happening at the same time because they're both pulling up carpets at the same time. Therefore, the duration of pulling up the carpets is reduced. So by fixing the work, I've fixed the work at 6 hours, and the work as then additional units means it can only then change the duration, and the duration value is changed. So this very important task type here needs to be borne in mind really only when you're editing a resource that is assigned to a task. When you make the initial assignment, it's not a problem. It makes the initial assignment based on the fact that you've set a duration, you're now supplying the units, so it carries out the calculation to work out what work is required, the number of hours work, physically working to get it done. If you then want to edit any of those variables, so the duration, the units supplied, or the work, then Microsoft Project has to alter one of the other two. If we fix one of the other two, then it's only allowed to alter the third. So we fixed in this case the work, changed the number of units. The only value left for it to produce is the duration. The total amount of work still remains at 6 hours, but the duration has now reduced. So it's something to bear in mind when you're editing and adding resources. You have to make the task respond how you want it to respond. It may be you're trying to get a project done faster, and by assigning more bodies to a particular task, that task duration can be reduced. So we add more people, we fix the amount of work. It's only going to take 6 hours of physical labor to pull up these old carpets. The more people we assign to do that, the faster it will get done. Let's add a third person. So we're going to call in the plumber as well to give us a hand. Okay, and you see the duration has reduced even further. It's now down to 0.25 of a day with 2 hours for each person, still giving me the grand total of 6 hours physical work. If I were to then remove the joiner and the plumber, select the joiner, delete, select the plumber, delete, and then say OK, the amount of work for the project manager goes back up to 6 hours, but that's still 6 hours in total. But the duration has then increased because we now only have one person carrying out that task. It is for this reason that I like this split view as a way of managing my resources. In none of the other views can you see both the task type, the work, the units, and the duration in one place. So that if anything happens, anything untoward in the reaction of Microsoft Project, you won't see it until further in the project when you suddenly go, how the heck are we going to take this kitchen out in half an hour? Because you potentially assigned too many resources and Microsoft Project has just been shrinking the duration value. So not in any of the other views. In the task information, I can see the resources, and under advanced, I can change the task type, but I can't see it in the same place. And I don't see a reaction to any of the changes until I click OK, by which point I've already made the changes. Definitely really don't like the assign resources box because that just reacts straight away. So I assign a person, that person is assigned, I then assign a second person. Its instant reaction is then to shrink the duration. So this is a big no-no for me, but it is there and it's fine for material resources. It's just these work resources. And then the resource name box here, well, you don't get much space, do you? And it's difficult in here to assign multiple resources and to assign parts of a resource, which all brings us back to the split screen here being the best choice, because I can go through each of my tasks and then use the bottom half to make the assignment of resources. So removing the old units, if I then initially assign meat, but I don't want to spend all week doing it, so let's say a quarter of me, but then the joiner, let's have two joiners working hard on that. The electrician is going to help as well. One electrician. Watch the length, it's still a week. And when I say OK, it's still a week, but now the calculation has been made. So the amount of hours for the joiners is 80, because that's 2 weeks of work, a week for each one. The electrician is on 40 and I'm on 10 hours, and the calculation has been made. If I leave this as fixed duration, so we cannot change, it's going to take a week regardless, and I put myself up to, let's say, the whole week doing this, then the duration doesn't change at all when I click OK, but my amount of hours goes up, therefore the cost. The cost is directly associated with the work here. So we control 3 variables. We can fix one of those. If we then change or edit one of the others, Microsoft Project is then left with just the third option to change. So that's the slight issue regarding work resources. None at all with materials and cost. You just assign those, any of the 4 methods, and there won't be a problem. It's just bearing in mind this task type when you start editing your work resources.